Thank you, sir. Now request Mr. Justice Pramod Koreji, Chairman of CAT, to address the public.
My younger brother, Mr. Raidada, and members of, I would say, my legal fraternity, because all of you seem to be interested in the judicial system prevailing in our country, whether you are a student of law or otherwise interested. So I embrace all of them in the definition of members of judicial fraternity. The subject of debate has a long history. One of the issues which I was trying to understand when the topic synopsis came to me relate to separation of the powers under the Constitution, with a view to understand what is the concept of separation of power. We must have a look to the various constitutional provisions and the overall constitutional setting. The issue can be segregated in two compartments. One is the separation of the power, and the second, the journey of courts and tribunals. First of all, I'll just briefly deal with the first issue, which is separation of power. Article 15, which is under the directive principles of state policy, deals with separation of judiciary from executive. And it says, states shall take steps to separate the judiciary from the executive in the public services of the state. There is no mention of legislature. So virtually, the separation of power which the Article 50 speaks of between the judiciary and the executive in public services of the state. The Supreme Court in various judgments, and one of the famous judgments, all of you know, is Supreme Court Advocate on Record, where for the first time the judiciary assumed the power of appointment of judges. Interpreting the expression consultation, the Supreme Court said that in the matter of appointment of the judges, the CJI, Chief Justice of India, will have the supremacy. Therefore, consultation to that extent may be construed as a concurrence. You will be surprised to know that in that judgment, that's a very long judgment, but if you find an opportunity, you must read it. Reference is made to 6 constitutions of the world. And if some of the provisions of those constitutions have been reproduced in the judgment. If you look those 6 constitutions of the world, not even a single country has the power where the single country constitution says the judges can only be appointed by the judges. In all those 6 countries where the constitutional provisions have been discussed, the power lie with the executive, but the Supreme Court assumed the power, and now in the recent judgment, National Judicial Commission, the Supreme Court has reiterated its view and said no. The independence of judiciary being a basic structure of the Constitution and applying the doctrine of basic structure, the Supreme Court continued to adhere with its earlier opinion that the only judges could appoint the judges. Now we must understand various other provisions of the Constitution in order to understand the doctrine of separation under the constitutional scheme overall. Part 5 of the Constitution, Chapter 1 deals with the executive. This is the executive, union executive. It is from Article 52 to Article 78, where this chapter deals with the entire gamut of the powers of the executive. Whether it is power to issue executive instructions, how the executive will run the country, how the governance will be there, so all that. I need not go into that. Chapter 2 of the same part deals with the parliament. That means the union legislature. It deals with the articles of 79 to Article 122. Article 122 specifically deals with the jurisdiction of the parliament and says courts not to inquire into the proceedings of the parliament. So the domain over which the parliament functions to make laws cannot be interfered by the courts. It says proceedings of parliament. So you have to draw a distinction, interference by court into the proceedings of the parliament and interference of the courts to test the validity of the laws enacted by the parliament, for which the judiciary alone has the jurisdiction. So it should not be misunderstood as if the courts will have no jurisdiction to interfere on any actions of the parliament. It is only the proceedings taken within the parliament. Just now Mr. Raizada had referred to some amendments made in Finance Act, and another dispute is money bill. You must have heard the debate being going on in the parliament whether in the Garba money bill, be it Aadhaar Act or be it a amendment to the various tribunals by way of Finance Act or a money bill, that debate is going on. Article 110 deals with the money bill, how the money bill is to be presented, and the debate is going on. And in this litigation, since I am from Central Administrative Tribunal, the local bar has also filed a petition in which this question also has been raised. There is a petition filed by the regarding the NGT. There is another petition filed in Madras, Kolkata, Allahabad. So many petitions have been filed regarding the amendment. I deal with that just after a while. Chapter 3 of the same part, that's part 5, deals with the legislative power of the president. And all of you know that the ordinance is a legislative measure, and the president has the power under Article 123. Then chapter 4 of the same part deals with the union judiciary. And union judiciary means only the Supreme Court. The high courts do not come within the union judiciary. So it is only the Supreme Court. We deal with the Article 124 to Article 147, the appointment of judges, their qualification, their removal, so and so on. Then comes Part 6. Part 6 deals with the states. Chapter 1 of Part 6 is regarding the states, and there is an interesting article. Today, before coming here, I was referred to Mr. Raizada, since he is working on another project on Article 35A. We had some discussion, but an important provision of the Constitution we missed on that day. That was Article 152. Article 152 says, it defines the state and says the expression state in this chapter does not include the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So from the definition of the states, the Jammu and Kashmir will not fall within the definition of state. This amendment came on 7th, this was second amendment in 1956. The basic idea was, at that time, when the Constitution came into being, there were two kinds of states, Part A states and Part B states. By virtue of this amendment, the Parts B states were done away with, and there was only one Schedule A, which deals with the states in general. It is rather surprising and shocking that under Schedule A, J&K state also exists at seal number 15. It is one of the state defined, listed in the Schedule A, but Article 152 says that the definition of state will not include the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And one of its adverse impacts is that the legislative powers of the state of Jammu and Kashmir extend beyond the state list. Since state list is not applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. As you know that under Schedule 7, there are three lists. The union list, for which the concurrent list, and the state list. Any entry in union list, only the parliament has the jurisdiction to enact laws. For concurrent list, both the state legislature and the parliament, and for state list, exclusive the state list. Though under certain circumstances, the parliament can also enact laws for the state, but it is with their concurrence. So the state list, which is there in the under Schedule 7, is not applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And with the result, the legislative powers of the state go beyond the state list. There is another link, Article 370, what kind of legislation made by the union and the under concurrent list can be extended. That's another chapter. I will not go into that. And chapter 2 under Part 6 deals with the executive. Executive here means the state executive. Article 153 to Article 167 deal with the executive of the state. Where comes the governor, the cabinet, the powers of the state executive and all that. Then chapter 3 under the state part, under the same Part 6, it is the state legislature, which includes the state assembly and state legislative council. Chapter 4 of the same part, which is the legislative power of the governor, that is again the power like president has the ordinance making power, similarly the governor has the ordinance making power. But I want to tell you the distinction between the powers of the governor under the Indian Constitution and the distinction of the powers of the governor under the state J&K state constitution. like the governor of any state has the legislative power to issue ordinances. Similarly, under section in J&K Constitution, the provisions are not called articles. These are referred to as sections. And the obvious reason is that the state constitution is subservient to the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution is supreme law of the land. And in one of the recent judgments, where a Sarfesi Act was under consideration in J&K, High Court had passed an order that the J&K state constitution is a sovereign power. So Supreme Court has set aside that judgment, and again that judgment is written by Justice Nariman, saying that no, the state constitution is not a sovereign power. State constitution, the constitution of state of Jammu and Kashmir is subservient to the Indian Constitution, so it can't be said to be a sovereign power. So the ordinance making power in section 91 is akin to the ordinance making power elsewhere with any governor. But there is another important section under the state constitution, that is section 92. Like the President of India has power under 356 to impose the president rule. The only state in this country is Jammu and Kashmir where the governor has similar powers. The governor under section 192, where he feels he is of the opinion that there is a failure of constitutional machinery, he can assume the powers, like President can assume under 356. He can impose governor rule for a period of 6 months. The caveat on that is that governor will have to seek the concurrence of the president for imposing the governor rule. Another important feature is, which is distinguishable, different than the other governors, under section 92, other than the ordinance making power, a governor during assumption of power in the state of Jammu and Kashmir can enact a law, a regular law, not ordinance. Ordinance is only when the parliament is not in session. But under section 92, of course, he can assume the powers of all the wings except the High Court. But in that, during that period, he can enact a law which can remain in force for a period of two years after the cessation of the proclamation imposing the governor. After the proclamation, whether it is revoked within 6 months or expires within the period of 6 months, that law will remain in force for a period of 2 years, or unless it is annulled by the assembly or the state legislature. So these are the separate powers of the governor of Jammu and Kashmir, which no other governor exercises. Then comes the chapter 5 under part 6, that is the High Court in state. Article 214 to 231 deal with the High Courts in different states. Here again, the J&K state has its own constitution has its own provisions regarding appointment of judges. And section 93 to section 96 or 97 of the state constitution deals with the appointment of the judges in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Since I belong to Jammu and Kashmir, my appointment was under section 95 of the state constitution and not under 217 of the Indian constitution. But of course, when I was transferred, I took oath under the Indian constitution. A judge of the J&K High Court will swear by the constitution of state of Jammu and Kashmir and not by the constitution of India. That's a unique thing. Then we have chapter 6 under the same part, which deals with the subordinate court. Article 233 to 37 deal with the subordinate court, and every high court has jurisdiction over the subordinate court under section 235, 230, 237, there are so many. Mr. Azada was just referring to when the Constitution came into being, the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court extended to all over the country, to all states, except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It was only by the Presidential Order of 1954 that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court was extended to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. I don't know how many of you know that the Supreme Court had a sitting outside this Delhi only once, and that was in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So, you will ask me why the Supreme Court had sitting in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. High Court of Jammu and Kashmir was established in 1928 by the command of the Maharaja. There was another forum which was an appellate forum over the High Court. That was Board of Judicial Advisors, which was an appellate forum over the High Court. So, when jurisdiction of Supreme Court was extended and when the Constitution was made applicable, so there was no appellate forum which could hear the why, which persuaded the central government to extend the jurisdiction of Supreme Court. And there were some appeals pending before the Board of Judicial Advisors, and those appeals were heard by the Supreme Court sitting in Jammu and Kashmir. About history of the tribunalization, Mr. Rajada explained that with in detail. I would only try to just add few things. As a student of law, Section 9 says that civil court will have jurisdiction to decide any civil right. When we talk of civil rights, it is not only right to property, right to office is a civil right. Right to visit a temple is a civil right. So civil right is a bundle of basically, if you say any right which a human being needs to exercise is a civil right. As a student of law, many people do not read two important provisions in CPC, Section 4 and Section 5. Section 4 and Section 5 is an exception to Section 9, which says if a separate forum is created, to that extent the jurisdiction of the civil court would be excluded. Many people do not read this provision. So Section 9, Section 4 and 5 are the exception to Section 9. And all law students and practicing advocates must read these. When we talk of Mr. Radada was referring to the L. Chandra Kumar, Sampath Kumar, I just want to make a small addition. In L. Chandra Kumar, the Supreme Court said that the powers being exercised by the CAT are powers of judicial review, which hitherto the High Court was exercising. Therefore, without saying that the High Court that the tribunal would exercise the 226 powers or 227 powers, the Supreme Court has virtually said that these powers to be exercised, power of judicial review, is akin to 226. Because if you go to High Court and tell the High Court that CAT is also exercising 226 powers, they feel offended. Therefore, in one of the recent writ petition, what happened? A lawyer, perhaps we did not grant him a stay. He went to the High Court and filed a petition challenging the tribunal's roles, that the administrative members, the chairman and all members of the tribunal cannot have the roles like a High Court judge or a Supreme Court judge. So we had to perforce contest that petition, and in that petition, in reply, the lawyer had said that we exercise 226 powers. I said, please don't do it. Then we modified that reply, saying that these powers are akin to 226. We are also exercising power of judicial review, and virtually that writ petition has been dismissed. And one thing important I may tell you, dress code is prescribed for the subordinate judges under the various High Court rules. But there is absolutely no provision wherein the dress code is prescribed by the Supreme Court and High Court judges. If anybody is able to search it, please let me know. No, it can add to my knowledge. I want to know it. My research work says there is absolutely no provision which prescribes the dress code for the High Court and Supreme Court judges. It is only a precedent from the England court that this dress which we wear, the black coat, the band, the jacket, and of course for seniors, the Advocates Act do say, but for judges of the High Court and the Supreme Court, there is no provision to prescribe the dress code. So, quoting all those things, ultimately that repetition has been dismissed. Long history about the courts working in ancient India and the courts working today. And then when British established the first courts, even subordinate courts, those were meant for only the Britishers. And thereafter the chartered courts were established in Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, and thereafter Allahabad. And thereafter two more courts were established, that is the Lahore High Court and Patna High Court. So we will sometime again discuss this. So these are the various provisions. The tribunals have definitely taken away a lot of burden of the regular courts. There is no dispute about it. And some of the tribunals are working very well. Even in CAT, though I joined recently, but the disposal rate is 94%. Now, because of the deficiency, recently the disposal rate has come down, but till 6 months back, the disposal rate of the CAT was 94%. And second problem with these new rules, Section 184 on the Finance Act has come. The Act says, amendment says, the appointment of the member and the chairman up to age of 5 years and reappointment up to age of 67, and for the chairman up to age of 70. But unfortunately, the rules which have been enacted, it says 3 years across the board. For the chairman 3 years, for the member 3 years, and we have a provision where a lawyer can become a member of the tribunal. Tell me, will any lawyer come to become a member of the tribunal for 3 years? Leaving his 15 years or 20 years practice? CAT, Central Administrative Tribunal Act, is the only act where the status of the members is defined as that of the equivalent to High Court judge. But no, they have reduced the status also as equal to a class 1 officer by these rules. The second problem is, no an administrative member can become a chairman of the tribunal. So, where the chairman of the tribunal is of the rank of the chief justice, and they can appoint any person as the chairman over him who will work in this tribunal. So these rules are absurd. In the writ petition, the Supreme Court has taken a serious view, On 21st it was listed, and now it is listed again on 9th of October. Attorney General has made a statement that the government is also looking into. We must evolve a mechanism so the system works. But sometimes we try to destroy the institution, which is neither in public interest nor in the interest of the institution. I fail to understand in whose interest such provisions are being made. And the government may have good intentions, but sometimes the bureaucracy plays its own role. For whatever reason it may be, we need not go into that. I am thankful to all of you for hearing me patiently. Despite I being the last speaker, I must have bored you a lot. Okay, thank you very much.